بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I want to welcome you all to our second lecture of a 3-lecture series on the fiqh and the virtues of the month of Ramadan. Walillah alhamd, last week we were able to begin our halaqah with the virtues and highlighting the virtues of this blessed month of Ramadan, which is just around the corner. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be amongst those who reach Ramadan and perform and devote ourselves successfully during that month. We spoke about these virtues and these blessings. From them we said the month of Ramadan was regarded as the month of forgiveness. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases His forgiveness and He sends His mercy upon us, it is also referred to as the mercy month or the month of mercy. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He favors us in that month. The Prophet ﷺ, he teaches us that when Ramadan enters, إِذَا دَخَلَ رَمَضَانَ فُتِحَتْ أَبْوَابُ الْجَنَّةِ وَغُلِّقَتْ أَبْوَابُ النَّارِ وَسُلْسِلَتِ الشَّيَاطِينِ. This is all a representation of Allah Azza wa Jal's mercy. We furthermore spoke about the blessings of the Quran, how the month of Ramadan is referred to as the month of Quran. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. And then we mentioned that the month of Ramadan certainly is the month of fasting, where fasting has been prescribed upon every single Muslim. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. And then we moved into the definition of fasting. The definition of fasting, both linguistically as well as technically. Linguistically, we said fasting, هو الإمساك عن الشيء, to refrain or to withhold from something. And we said شرعا اصطلاحا, technically, it is referred to as the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the intention of refraining from food, drink, and major intimacy from the adhan of Fajr to the adhan of Maghrib. And then we went on and we discussed the ruling, the hukm of fasting. And we spoke about the evidences found in the Quran. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامِ. That is one evidence, 184 and 185 of Surah Al-Baqarah. فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. We spoke about that. From the ahadith or from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ. That Islam is established on 5, and from those pillars is fasting during the month of Ramadan. And we said by consensus amongst the scholars that there is no argument there that fasting is a pillar of our faith. And then we went on to speak about the qualities of the fasting person. When does it become an obligation upon a person to fast? We said number 1, they need to be Muslim, right? They have to be a Muslim because they have to accept Allah in order for Allah to accept them. That's the first thing. Then we said they have to be aqil, they have to be mentally sound, they have to have intellect, they have to have the capacity to formulate the intention. They have to be baligh, they have to be mature, meaning they have to have reached the age of puberty. And then we said tahira, the sister, and this is more specifically, she needs to be ritually pure from either her menstruation or the postnatal bleeding or postpartum bleeding. So this is what qualifies then a person to acquire that responsibility and that obligation. And then we moved on to the pillars of fasting. And we spoke about the pillars of fasting, mainly the intention. And we said that we cannot establish a proper fast without a proper intention. And we said that there are 2 effective ways to establish an intention. The first is the generic intention, which is made in the beginning of the month with the intention of seeing it through the whole month, every single day, making that intention that you are committed to fasting every single day during Ramadan, and that is one generic intention that would suffice throughout the whole month. But we also mentioned that the Malikis, they put a condition on that if sometime throughout the month you stop fasting, either due to illness or travel or menstruation or whatever the situation may be, then when you begin to fast again, you have to rejuvenate that intention for the rest of the remaining days of Ramadan. And then we said the second way to establish the intention is to establish it every evening, right? And that can be as simply as setting your alarm for suhoor. Setting your alarm for suhoor is an indirect way of establishing your intention, right? Because you're setting it for a time where you would normally not wake up. You would normally not wake up. Tayyib. And then we went on to time. With regards to time, we spoke about two types of time. The first of which is the month itself, meaning we cannot fast the month of Ramadan outside of Ramadan. And the only time where a fast of Ramadan can be performed outside of Ramadan is if we're actually making qada, which is making up a fast that we have missed during the month of Ramadan. And then we went a little bit more specific with regards to the time within the day. And we said that the time is obviously from the adhan of Fajr till the adhan of Maghrib, where Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ ثُمَّ أَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. So this is essentially the time and the condition, or as some scholars say, the pillar of fasting. So that's where we left off. And we also spoke about suhoor and the reasons for suhoor and the blessings and the barakah of suhoor as well. We covered a lot last class. And in today's class, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we have a lot we need to cover. But we're going to focus more so on a specific segment of the fiqh, which is referred to as those who are exempted from fasting. Those who are exempted from fasting. Now, Allah Azza wa Jal, He does not burden a soul more than it can handle. And Allah Azza wa Jal will never hold a person accountable for something that is not within their physical capabilities. That is from the mercy and from the justice of Allah Azza wa Jal. That being said, Allah understands that not every single one of us are the same. Every single one of us are going through different things. And as we grow, things change. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being our creator, He understands this. That being said, Allah Azza wa Jal has presented to us within our sharia concession, right? A rukhsa for people who are not able, or people who may find fasting difficult. So this is showing us the mercy and the flexibility of our faith. Our faith is not rigid. It is vast, very flexible. And that flexibility comes from the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And we will highlight that mercy in tonight's class by mentioning these different categories of individuals who are exempted from fasting. A lot of the times the imams at this time of year, their phones will ring, their emails will fill up, and it'll always be, about 5 or 6 of the same questions all the time. And from those questions are, this is my situation, do I have to fast? So inshallah ta'ala, what we cover in tonight's class will be able to help shed some light on this specific question, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So let's get started, as there's a lot that we need to cover. And this is not a halaqah where, we can just hear. It's a halaqah where we're going to need to listen. And there's a difference between hearing something and listening to something, because it's very technical. It is very technical. So we want to focus bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So when we talk about concession and those who have been given this rukhsa by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first category we are going to speak on are individuals who have been afflicted with illness or sickness. So a sick individual, right? And sickness is of two types. There's a temporary illness, and then there's chronic illness. And we need to distinguish between the two because both of them take two different rulings. So let's begin, inshallah ta'ala, with a temporary illness. Now, what is a temporary illness? A temporary illness is an illness that we are dealing with knowing that inshallah ta'ala within a short period of time, Allah Azza wa Jal will cure us. So an example of this is like a cold or a flu or severe migraines that you may be dealing with at a specific time. So there are many different types of temporary illnesses. And the evidence for this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah verse 184, He says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. So here Allah is clearly presenting to us the concession that whoever from you is ill or traveling, then it is upon them to make up that fast at another day. And this here we're talking about is a temporary illness, because Allah would not tell somebody who has a chronic illness to make it up another day, and we will get into that inshallah ta'ala. So a question that is always asked is, how sick do I need to be to break my fast? This is something that many of us we struggle with. It's like we wake up, we feel sick, but we don't know if that sickness is sufficient or enough for us to break our fast, because we're sincere. We don't want to upset Allah, right? We want to be as obedient as possible. But if I'm sick, I'm sick. But how sick do I need to be in order to break my fast? Well, the measuring stick can be looked at by analyzing two things. The first of which is we ask ourselves, is by fasting my sickness going to increase in severity? So that's the first question we want to ask ourselves. Is my illness, the struggle that I'm facing, my temporary sickness, is by fasting, refraining from food and drink, hydration and nutrition, if doing that, is it going to increase the severity of this illness? That's number one. Number two is going to be, if I fast, is it going to prolong my recovery? Is it going to prolong my recovery? Right? Because what will happen, sometimes you're like, no, I'm just going to fast. And you fast that day, and it puts you out for like 4, 5, 6, 7 days. When if you just took that day off, it would have been only what? 1 day. It would have been 1 day. So sometimes you have to listen to your body. Sometimes you have to listen to your body. Okay? So those are the two questions that you want to ask yourself. Will it increase the severity of my illness, or will it cause a longer time, or will it prolong my recovery? And if you can answer that question effectively, clearly, then you will have your answer as to whether or not you want to or you need to break your fast. Sincerity is also very important. And that's the first thing that Allah wants to look at, is just sincerity, right? And understanding these basic principles. What is the ruling then for someone who breaks their fast? So I wake up, I'm sick, I ask myself, is this going to prolong my recovery? Is this going to cause more severity to the illness? Yes and yes. I say, okay, in this situation, I'm going to break my fast. So I'm breaking my fast, right? Now I'm breaking my fast. That doesn't give me the green card to go to school or university or wherever it may be around other Muslims and, be drinking my water and be like, I'm sick, by the way, it's okay. You don't need to judge me. No, it's your problem. You're going around drinking during Ramadan. You're putting yourself in that situation. That's not what you should be doing. That's not what you should be doing. But if you need to drink, then do it in a place where you are not, causing people to second guess you or question you, right? But the question here is, what is the ruling now? So what is the ruling? The ruling is found in the Quran. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. So I don't fast during Ramadan, month of Ramadan. What is my expiation, or what is the obligation? The obligation is that you make it up before the next what? Ramadan. It's very simple. The sooner the better, because a lot of the scholars, they refer to those days as being indebted by, you're in debt to Allah Azza wa Jal. And it's always important that we pay off our debts as fast and as soon as possible. I mean, you did not have to get up and bring me this. Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you. I have to start training myself that I need to stop drinking. Is that right? Yeah, I know you guys had to think about how to come up with this bottle of water. I know. This is not out of the case. I know. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. We'll drink while we still can, inshallah. طيب. So we need to make it up. A question is posed. What? A question is posed. And that question is as follows. What if I didn't make up before Ramadan? What if I had an amount of days that I didn't make up before Ramadan? What do I do? And it's just like I'm not able to do it. Maybe there's too many days, or it's just the situation will not allow me to. Well, the scholars, they say, number one, that is a sin. It is a sin that we have committed. So we require to make what? Tawbah. There needs to be tawbah. We need to ask Allah for forgiveness. That's the first thing. The second thing that the scholars encourage us to do, and I say encourage, and I don't say you have to do it, it's something that is encouraged to do, is to actually pay on behalf of that day that you missed, while still having to make it up after you finish this Ramadan. So you finish this Ramadan, you still have to make up the days that you missed from last Ramadan afterwards. So there is a fidya, there is essentially a compensation by paying or feeding a person, and then number two, by making it up as you are still carrying that debt. So that is the ruling. That is the ruling for the person who is temporary ill, a temporary illness. Now, somebody who has a chronic illness, somebody who is suffering from like severe diabetes, or is on a boatload of medication. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure and strengthen our brothers and sisters who are struggling with different sicknesses and diseases. So in a situation where somebody, they have diabetes, or they have a heart condition, or they're on a lot of medication that they have to take in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Now, how does that person approach fasting? Well, they don't. They don't fast. And that is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ruling for that is found in the Quran. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. So here, this is the difference between the person who is temporarily ill and the person who is chronically ill. Number one is that once they recover, they have to fast and make it up. Whereas the person who is chronically ill, they're essentially, except with the permission of Allah, wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir, of course, but from a medical position, he is not going to recover from this illness. So upon them is simply feeding the needy, feeding the poor. One meal for every single day that is missed. Yani 1 mud of wheat, and a mud is essentially 2 handfuls, or a half a sa' of any type of staple food, which is double that. The scholars, they also say, or a basic meal that you and I would eat. So a basic meal could run from anywhere from $7 to $15. And depending on your financial status is what you would ultimately pay for every single day. So if you're somebody who's really struggling with wealth, and you yourself are not eating a meal every day that is worth $15, then generally you would go down to a lower number. But if you're somebody who's well off and you eat well and your family eats well, then generally لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. So just as you would like to eat something good, it is the same thing as you would present that to somebody in need as well. So if you are ill and that illness is recognized as a chronic illness, then your expiation, your kafara, your fidya is to feed one person every single day of the month of Ramadan. Now, when do I need to make that payment? Well, it's very simple. It can either be made in the beginning of Ramadan, during Ramadan, or after Ramadan, or it can be made after every day. A lot of the scholars, they say it's better to pay it after the day has been missed, because before the day is missed, there's nothing that is mandatory upon you to give. So it's better to do it, You can do it in the beginning, sure, but if you can do it every day, that's good, or you can do it towards the end of Ramadan, that is good as well, because you've accumulated those days in which it is required for you to pay back to Allah Azza wa Jal. طيب. Do we understand now the issue with the ill? Let me recap it quickly. Somebody who is sick, there are two types of sicknesses. There is the temporary illness, and then there is the chronic illness. And we said they both take different rulings. As for the temporary illness, we ask ourselves, is this going to cause greater severity, or is it going to prolong? If yes, then we break our fast, and the only thing we need to do is make up before the next Ramadan. And if we don't, then we should pay, and we should make it up after that Ramadan. Also make istighfar and tawbah. As for the person who is chronically ill, then that person, as reported in the Quran, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٌ. Right? And there's a key thing that I want to mention here. He says, طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٌ. So don't say, oh, I have a shortcut to take care of this. I'm going to invite all my friends over to my house, 30 of my bestest friends, and I'm going to feed them, and that is going to expiate. No, because the criteria and the attribute is given to the individual who should receive it, which is that he is in need. He is in need. He is miskeen. He is poor. He is less fortunate. He does not have enough to suffice for himself or his family. Okay? So let's make that very, very clear. It's not to the general folk, but it's to a specific demographic. طيب. Let's move on to number 2, which is the traveler. The traveler. So the traveler who is permitted to combine their prayer. Combine their prayer. So when you are able to combine your prayer, you are also able to break your fast. Now, what qualifies a person for being a traveler? This is an important question. What qualifies me as a traveler? Now, there are two ways that we can regard someone as a traveler within the Sharia. The first of which is that we use a distance, which is generally 80 kilometers or 83 kilometers. Meaning, anyone who is traveling outside of the city, and when I say outside of the city, I have to make it clear because I'm not saying from outside of your house, right? So say you live in, mathalan, you live all the way in the south, way down in the south, okay? And you're going to Edmonton. Now you're going to have to cross Calgary, and get all the way to the northeast, and that's a fair amount of kilometers. You don't start from your home, but you start from the end of the city limits. That's where you begin. Okay? So 80 kilometers from the city limits. If you're traveling 80 kilometers, then you're good. Mathalan, you're traveling to Canmore. Would you qualify? Yes, you'd qualify. Right? You'd qualify. You're traveling outside of the city to Chestermere. You want to go to Chestermere? This is how some brothers, they like to play around. They say, I'm going to travel today. Where are you going, brother? Well, I'm going to Lake Chestermere, mashallah. Lake Chestermere, mashallah. Yes, I'm going to be breaking my fast and taking my family, inshallah. We're out of the city. I'm out of the city, brother. Where are you? He's like, I'm in Chestermere. I say, yeah, Chestermere, Calgary, yeah, come on, man. We do not consider Chestermere outside of Calgary, even though it is a different town. It's not a city, but it's a town. I know they're working hard, inshallah, in becoming a city. Or maybe they are a city. I don't know. No shade to the brothers and sisters in Chestermere. Right? But that's the reality. Even though it's out of the city, it's not 80 kilometers out of the city. So it wouldn't qualify. The second thing that would qualify a person in being a traveler is actually just the customs of society. So if you are customarily regarded as a traveler, then you would qualify for this concession. Now, what does that mean? Let's say, is there like a place that's closer than Canmore? Not too far? Like Cochrane? No, we need something a little bit further. Strathmore. Strathmore is, okay. Strathmore is what? 40 kilometers out of the city? 50? Okay, let's say Strathmore. We could possibly say Strathmore, like the end of Strathmore. Good. So Strathmore is southeast, if I'm not mistaken, right? East, sure. So say you're going for a couple nights to Strathmore. I don't know why you would, but you're going for a couple nights to Strathmore, mashallah, you and the family. And you pack your bags, you grab your toothbrush, you put in, your undergarments, everything that you would you load the car and you leave. Now, it's not necessarily 80 kilometers out of the city, but if someone called you, you're like, I'm out of the city, I'll be gone for a couple of days, then that person would understand what? That you are traveling. So the customs will also serve as a means of recognizing you as a traveler. So those are the two ways that you would qualify as a traveler. Number one, you're traveling out of the city, from the city limits, over 80 kilometers, or you're traveling a fair distance, may not necessarily be over 80 kilometers, but within the customs of society and the way you've prepared yourself, you would be regarded as a traveler. So now the concession applies. Okay, so I'm traveling. Now the question is, when can I break my fast? I wake up on the day of my travels, I need to be fasting. And I cannot break my fast until I actually exit the city limits. Until I look around and I find that there are no more homes or there are no more communities, and we're out in the boonies or we're out in the prairies and I'm looking around and there's nothing there, at that moment I can break my fast because I've left the city and I'm a traveler. If you're on a plane, what I usually say is the moment the seatbelt light goes on, then you can break your fast. Because by that time, you're well out of the city. That's about 15, 20 minutes of flight time in of itself. Right? So you're going to the airport, you're still fasting. You're waiting to board the plane, you're still fasting. You get on the plane, you're still fasting. The plane takes off, the plane has lifted from the ground, you're still fasting. The moment you exit the city limits, at that point you can break your fast. Now the question comes here. How long can I break my fast? How many days? And we need to understand this both for our fasting as well as our salah. Okay? So, the general ruling that we find is 4 days. Some of the madhahib will say up to 15 days. Some of the madhahib will say 4 days, including the day of travel and the day of return. So the day of departure and the day of return, so almost 6 days. Some madhahib, they will say, if you don't know the day of your return, then you can fast until you know the day of your return. But let's keep this 4-day principle. Now let's use 4 days as the general, as the general principle, as the general ruling. 4 days. This is the position of the Hanabila. The position of the Shafi'iyya is 4 days, 1 day for travel, 1 day for departure, and 1 day for return. And the position of the Hanafis are 15 days. Okay, just so I can put it out there. But let's use 4 days. So what does this mean? And this is where a lot of people make a mistake. It means that if I am going to Toronto, for example, and I know that I'm staying in Toronto for longer than 4 days, the moment I land in Toronto, I need to start fasting. While I'm traveling, I can break my fast. Right? So let's say I leave here at 10 a.m. I wake up, I fast, the plane takes off 10 a.m. By 10:15, 10:20, I'm in the air, I break my fast, I land in Toronto like 6 o'clock p.m. I land in Toronto, I don't have a fast that day, right? But the next day, I have to fast. I have to fast. Because I'm regarded as a muqim, as a resident. Because I know that I'm going to be staying there longer than 4 days. Some people, they make the mistake of, okay, I'm staying there for 7 days. I'll get there, I'll land, the next day, I'll break my fast, the next day I'll break my fast, the next day I'll break my fast, oh, there's my 4 days, the next day I will fast. That's incorrect. That is incorrect. If you know that you are staying in Toronto for longer than 4 days, then the moment you arrive, you are automatically regarded as a resident of that specific city or that town or that place. Now, if I'm going to Toronto and it's an in and out, meaning I'm there for 2 days, I'm there for 1 day, I'm there for 3 days, then guess what? I can land in Toronto, I'm not fasting that day. The next day, I don't need to fast. The following day, I don't need to fast. The third day, I don't need to fast because the next day I'm traveling back. So do we understand the difference here? And the same goes with our salah as well. The same goes with our salah as well. And that is the same with, like, for example, the Hanafis. If it is 15 days, it's 15 days. If you know you're going for a month back home, then the moment you land in that country, no matter where you're going, you're considered a resident. And people say, it's Ramadan, travel season. Don't play. This is not how we play with Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? This is not how we play with Allah Azza wa Jal. So do we understand that? How long can I break my fast? Well, that determines how long you are traveling for, how long you know and understand you are traveling, and which specific madhab you are following. Which specific madhab you are following, or what your imam is teaching you. What is the ruling? What is the ruling? Oh, just one last thing I want to mention about the traveler. Say you come back from your travels and you broke your fast. You came back and you're in the city, it's 2 o'clock p.m. You need to fast. Okay? You need to fast. And that day it doesn't count. But you need to fast. So you come back from your travel, now the concession has been lifted. You need to fast for the remainder of the evening. And you have to make that day up. That is how our Sharia presents to us our responsibility when fasting. What is the ruling? What is the ruling? Meaning, what is the fidya or what is the kafara? فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. It is similar to the ruling of the person who is temporarily ill, that they need to just make it up before the next Ramadan. Now, the question here is this. What is better? So I'm traveling. Should I break my fast or should I not break my fast? This is a question that many people ask. Now, irrespectively of the difficulty of your fasting, you have every right to break your fast. It is consensus amongst the scholars that if you are fasting, if you choose to break your fast or you choose to fast, your fast is still valid. And if you choose not to fast, it is still valid excuse. So it's not an issue here of validity. But the issue here is what is more preferred. What is preferred? Now, some of the madhahib, they will say it's actually makruh to fast when you are traveling. It's disliked. Because Allah is clearly giving us the concession. But some people will say, well, you know what? It's an easy flight. And fasting and traveling is not like it was during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. I can be halfway, I can be on the other side of the country in 4.5 hours. And it's easy. It's nothing. I just get on the plane, I close my eyes, I wake up, I'm there. Right? It's different. So they say, I don't want to. Do they have the right to break their fast? Absolutely. Do they have the right to remain fasting? Absolutely. And the scholars, they differ in terms of what is better. And what is amazing is that many of them, they use the same hadith to present their opinion. The same hadith is presenting two separate opinions. So the hadith of Jabir radiallahu an, when it comes to fasting, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they went out on an expedition. And many people they followed, they were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they stopped to take a break. And as they were taking that break, the Prophet ﷺ found a group of people surrounding a man, like fanning the man down. The man's like passed out on the ground. He's out. And then the Prophet, he comes, alayhi salatu wasalam, and he inquires, what's going on? And they say, Ya Rasulullah, innahu sa'im. He's fasting. This man is fasting. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Laysa min al-bir, sawm fi safar. It is not from righteousness to fast during travel. So the people who regard it as being makruh or disliked, they use this hadith because the hadith is very clear. It is not from righteousness to fast while you are traveling. I don't need anything clearer than that. The Prophet didn't say it is haram. That's why we don't say it's haram. But the Prophet ﷺ is it's not from righteousness. And anything that's not from righteousness is disliked. So the ruling is that it is makruh. However, the other group of scholars will say, no. We have to put everything into what? Context. That the reason the Prophet ﷺ said this is not because of generally fasting during traveling is not from righteousness. It's that when it causes you to be in a state where you're passed out on the ground and people have to stop what they're doing and start fanning you and you're causing, chaos amongst the people, that's when it's disliked. So what can we conclude? We can conclude that يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر. That is the principle we will take. That if it is easy for you to fast, and if it is not going to cause a problem, and you don't want to miss the opportunity of fasting during the blessed month of Ramadan, and you don't want to have to make it up, then it is okay and it is fine for you to continue to fast. But if you want to break your fast, even if the travel is luxury, you're flying first class all the way to, mashallah, Bali, Allah, mashallah, then you can break your fast, not a problem. You go to Edmonton, it's a 3-hour drive, 3.5-hour drive. It's not a big deal. You want to break your fast. You want to go to Banff. You want to go to Banff with the family. You want to break your fast. And nobody should be judging the other person. Astaghfirullah al-azim. This guy. Look at this sister. She doesn't fear Allah Azza wa Jal. Both of them are accepted Islamically. So do we understand now the traveling individual? We know who the traveler is. What qualifies us as being a traveler, we understand. Right? We understand when we are able to break our fast after we have exited the city. How long can I break my fast for? We use the 4 days, generally speaking. What is the ruling? The ruling is that we make it up after Ramadan, before the next Ramadan. And what is better? We said, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمْ الْعُسْرَ. That is the principle. So that's very clear, inshallah ta'ala. Let's move on to number 3, old age. Now by fasting, if it will cause harm to you, you're an elderly man, you're an elderly woman, you're a senior, and you're getting old. And if by fasting, it will trigger weakness, extreme weakness, it will trigger possible illness. Your doctor is telling you, listen, I don't think that you should fast. I don't think it is healthy for you in your state right now, considering your age and your physical being right now, your physical state. You have that medical, advice. Then you don't need to fast. And you would fall under the category of the chronically ill, the person who is chronically ill. So what is upon you is just to feed every single day that you miss. To feed every وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Right? So you yourself, you understand your body. Your doctor, more preferably your Muslim doctor, has told you, yeah, it's probably not your best choice to fast. We're very worried about you fasting. It is our position, it is our advice that you should refrain from fasting. With that being said, then inshallah ta'ala, you fall under the category, as Ibn Abbas says in this verse, those who are unable to fast, you need to pay every single day. And we spoke about beginning, during, and after, inshallah ta'ala. Number 4, children. So we have the old and we have the young. Now, a very often question asked is, does my child need to fast? Does my child need to fast? Now, fasting, it becomes compulsory, and we spoke about this, once the child reaches the age of puberty. And as we know, puberty is unique for every person. Every person reaches the stage and goes through puberty at their own time, in their own way. So there's no black and white answer. However, Islamically, we say if your child has not reached puberty and they have reached the age of 15 lunar years, which is equivalent to about 14 and a half years old, 14 and a half. If your child has not reached the signs of puberty or has gone through puberty, the transition of puberty, and they're 14 and a half, then they are considered mukallaf. They're considered mature in the sight of Allah, and they have to fast. Right? But other, forms of, or other ways to recognize signs of puberty are, pubic hair, for the women, the menstruation, as well as, possibly wet dreams. These are things that we understand a child is going through or is, completing the phase of puberty. Okay? But a child who is, essentially still a child, not an adolescent, then upon them it's not compulsory to fast. They don't need to fast. If they want to fast, they will be rewarded. If they don't fast, it will not be held against them. So what is the result? What is the ruling? There is no fidya or kafara, and there is no qada. Why is there no qada? Because they're not mukallaf. They're not mature, and they're not obligated in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, sisters, brothers, to our children, we want to slowly nurture them when it comes to the concept and the ibadah of fasting. So if you have a child who's I know children in grade 3 who have fasted all of Ramadan. So grade 3 is 8 years old, by the way. So I know children, I see them every day, 8 years old, they fast every single day. And I know children in grade 5, they don't fast maybe if they're lucky one day during the month of Ramadan. And guess what? I don't blame the child. Because if it was my choice, I wouldn't be fasting until I graduated grade 12. I don't blame the child. I actually blame the parents. And the reason why I blame the parents is that because they have not trained their children. They've not trained their children. They've not instilled the understanding, the love, the honor, the izzah of fasting in their child. So from a young age, we need to be very strategic with our children. You want to fast for 15 minutes? Fast. A lot of the times in my house, our children will fast before iftar. So we'll say, the next hour, nobody's eating or drinking. Kitchen closed. And they're like 6 and 3 years old. But you're instilling an idea here. An idea of restraint. An idea of self-discipline. The next year, okay, after Asr, nobody is eating. The next year, after Dhuhr, or sometimes people will say half day. Go to school, half day. Don't eat anything all the way until lunch. Don't take your snack. Don't ask to go to the water fountain. But when lunch comes, eat your lunch. And that's how we train our children, inshallah ta'ala. So we said the ruling for the children who are not fasting, there's no kafara, there's no expiation, and there is no makeup because it is not it is not prescribed upon them. So we have two more categories of people, and this is mainly concerning the sisters, inshallah ta'ala. The fifth category of people are the menstruating and the postpartum bleeding woman. So, the sister who is on her menstruation, or the sister who has given birth, and 40 days after birth, she is on her nifas. She is essentially in that state where she is not to pray or not to fast, up to 40 days. Now, the general menstruation of a woman will last from 6 to 7 days. But again, every woman is unique. Every woman is unique. Now, an often question that is posed by women when it comes to their menstruation is fasting is when. When? Two questions. When do I stop and when do I start? This is something that women are burdened with, right? And it's difficult at times to gauge. Now, the best piece of advice that I can give you is a principle that we find in our usul. And that principle is the following principle. And that is, and for men, don't be like, this is a break for us. No, listen, you have sisters, you have wives. We need to know this as well. Al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak. Certainty cannot be negated by doubt. This is the principle you want to live your life by when it comes to the menstruation. That certainty cannot be negated by doubt. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? When you are not on your menstruation, it is certain that you are in a state of ritual purity. It is certain. And you will remain in that state until you become certain that you are no longer in a state of ritual impurity. Now, what does that mean? Sometimes a woman, as the menstruation slowly comes, there will be some slight, there will be some discharge. They're not sure. They're not 100% sure. So they're saying, is this my menstruation? Is this my menstruation? I'm not sure. So as long as you are in a state where you are not 100% sure, your doubt cannot negate your certainty of being in a state of purity. Is that understood? So your inability to be certain 100%, not 100%, your inability to be certain, and a woman will know when she is 100%. She understands her body better than anybody else. Until you are certain, then you remain in a state of what? Purity. And if you're in a state of ritual purity, then you continue with your fasting and your prayer. And the same goes for coming out of the state. You will be, after you are certain you're in a state of ritual impurity, then after those 6 or 7 days, or depending what your regular cycle is, until you become certain that you are off of your menstruation. And generally a woman will be certain in 2 ways. The discharge becomes clear or the area becomes completely dry. That is when a woman becomes certain that she is off her menstruation. So until those actually happen, then you consider yourself to be in a state of ritual, what? Impurity. And you refrain from what? Fasting and salah. So this is the principle. The certainty of your state cannot be negated by doubt. And it is only when you are certain that that state has changed that you take the ruling of that state. Inshallah ta'ala, that helps. Anything above 15 days for a menstruating woman generally would be considered abnormal. So if your menstruation is prolonged for over 15 days, then generally in the books of fiqh, they would look at that as being istihada. It would be abnormal, and you would have to actually fast after 15 days, and you would have to pray, but you would have to clean yourself accordingly. What is the ruling? It is qada. So the menstruation will take the ruling as someone who is temporarily what? Ill. Now this is a question we get a lot of the times, or a comment. Islam oppresses women, and it oppresses women in worship. And sometimes they'll even take it to the point where they say it degrades women in worship, because God doesn't allow a woman to worship Him in a state of ritual impurity. Ritual impurity. This is blasphemous, this statement. The struggle, the pain, the difficulty, emotions that a woman goes through during these moments, we don't view it as oppression, we actually now view it as a sign of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a mercy, it is an honor, it is a love from Allah that He understands this state that you are in, that He gives you a concession. And He says, take care of yourself. Worry about yourself. And your obedience to me is in you breaking your fast. And you will be rewarded as if you fast, but you still need to make the fast up. So the ruling here is that the fast, it needs to be made up, but the prayers, they don't. The prayers, in Islamically, Hadith Aisha radiallahu anha, the prayers are not made up for a woman when she's on her menstruation, but the fast, it needs to be made up before the next Ramadan. Let's finish with our final segment here, and that is the pregnant and the breastfeeding woman. Okay? So by consensus amongst the scholars, it is permissible for a woman to break her fast when she is pregnant or breastfeeding. So when she's pregnant for 9 months, or she's breastfeeding for up to 2 years, it is permissible for her. Now, that's not an issue. But where the scholars differ is what is the kafara and what is the qada. Okay? This is where the scholars, they differ. So generally, it will be presented like this. If a woman is pregnant or breastfeeding, and she worries for herself and her own well-being, her hydration, her nutrition, then she breaks her fast, and she falls under the category as being what? Temporarily sick. She fears for herself, her body. If I fast, my blood levels are going to go down. I'm going to get sick. I'm going to feel extremely weak. My doctor is telling me, this is not probably the best. And some women, they love to fast when they're pregnant, and some women just can't hold it. So every woman is different, and no woman should judge another woman. If you fear for your child, this is where the scholars, they differ. If you fear for your child, the scholars will say, you mean you feel for either the child or the fetus. Because if you're pregnant, you're fearing for the fetus. If you're breastfeeding, you're fearing for the child. So if you fear for the fetus or you fear for the child, then the ruling is different. So, the Hanabila and the Shafi'is, they will say that if you break your fast out of fear, not for yourself, you're fine, I'm good, but I'm just concerned about my child, then you have to make the day up and you have to feed a person. This is what they will say. The Hanafis will say you have to make the day up, but it is recommended. It is recommended that you feed as well. It's not mandatory, it's not prescribed, but it's recommended. The Malikis, they will say, we distinguish between the pregnant and the breastfeeding. If she is pregnant, she just needs to make up. If she is breastfeeding, she needs to make up and she needs to pay. So depending on where you stand and the madhahib that you are, or the madhab that you are following, or your family is following, or the imam that you are listening to, then you would follow accordingly. However, I would like to make this disclaimer. There is another position. And this is the position of two great companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and it is more specific for the woman who is frequently pregnant. Okay? So this is the statement of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu an and Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. Okay? And these two, and these are not just like, these are giants. Abdullah ibn Umar, in terms of his hadith narration, and Abdullah ibn Abbas in terms of his understanding of the Quran. Come on, you're not going to get better. You have the Quran and you have the Sunnah, mashallah. So they are of the opinion, radiyallahu anhuma, that if a woman is frequently pregnant. Now what does it mean frequently pregnant? A woman is pregnant 9 months. Then she gives birth. Then she breastfeeds for 2 years. Within those 2 years, she becomes pregnant again. Another 9 months, and then what? Another 2 years. And then maybe she has back to back to back. Right? It's a dynasty now, mashallah. Right? So now, what happens? How many years are we talking about? How many years is that? So that's 9 years, isn't it? That's 9 years. 3 kids, 9 years. What's the math? 9 times 30. Yallah. 9 times 30. Don't ask me. I'm not your math teacher. 270? 270. 200. The whole year you're fasting, mashallah, tabarakallah. That's difficult. A woman's going to be like, forget about it. To your sister, you are indebted 270 days begin. That's difficult. That's difficult. لا ضرر ولا ضرار. This is the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes a brother, when he falls into a problem during Ramadan, we'll talk about this next week, he maybe, commits, major intimacy. And we say, Ya akhi, shahrayni mutatabi'ain. He's like, oh my God, I'm done. And this happens, brothers. I know brothers who have gone through this. 2 months. They're like, it's killer. So that's 60 days. Let alone 270 days, have to make them up. Those 60 days are a little bit tough because they have to be mutatabi'ain. We'll learn about this next class, inshallah, when we talk about the nullifiers of fasting. That's a big class next week, by the way, inshallah. The nullifiers of fasting. I don't want to see that. Okay? So, the woman, according to Ibn Abbas radiallahu an and Ibn Umar radiallahu an, they're saying that if a woman is frequently pregnant and she's accumulated all of these days, then upon her is what? Just to pay. Just to pay. Okay? Furthermore, the one who needs to pay is the husband. The husband needs to pay. Because it is the husband's responsibility of the child. The husband is financially responsible for the child. So that is a disclaimer. That is something that I needed to present to the community. And you can take it how you take it. But I essentially have explained to you every single madhab, the general ruling. There are differences of opinions even within the madahib, but these are the general rulings within the madahib. And I've also given you the position of two great companions, in Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. So we have come to the end of our class today. So just to quickly list off those who are exempted, we have the ill, the chronically ill, the temporary ill individual, the traveler, we spoke about the traveler, the individual who has reached old age, the individual who is young, under the age of maturity, under the age of puberty. We also spoke about the woman who is on her menstruation or postnatal bleeding. And we also spoke about the breastfeeding and the pregnant woman, inshallah ta'ala. Next week is a big week. It is our final week, inshallah. And we will be discussing what? The nullifiers of fasting. What are the things that actually break my fast? I look forward to seeing you all next week, inshallah ta'ala. جزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.